Okay, let us begin. 43-year-old first-class passenger Isaac Frauenthal was a lawyer from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. He had a law practice in New York City. He was boarding a particular liner with his brother, 49-year-old Dr. Henry Frauenthal, and the doctor's 42-year-old wife, Clara. Now, Isaac was a little trepidatious as he boarded the Titanic because he had a dream. He had a dream shortly before sailing, which actually disturbed him. He dreamt that he was on a steamship which suddenly crashed into something big and began to sink, started to go down. He was, however, not the superstitious type, and therefore he decided to think nothing of it. Nothing until the dream repeated itself again, literally the night before the ship embarked. Now he was worried, but he still went on the boat, and he never told his brother about the dreams, feeling himself somewhat foolish. That's what happened. Long story short, we know what happened in terms of the boat. As far as he's concerned, yes, ultimately he and his brother and his wife, everybody survived. But he had that dream, and he shared it only, of course, after the fact. So I have a question for you. I'm going to begin with a question. Had you been in Isaac Frauenthal's position, would you have boarded the Titanic?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow. That's
No.
pretty much, we got one no. Who is the no? Why not?
I've had 3 experiences where something like that's happened and it's come to fruition. So I think there's a lot of power behind dreams.
Okay. So you're saying that post, but if that would have been your first dream ever?
Probably not.
Fair enough. Okay. Bottom line, you have somebody who's not sure. Well, okay. I'm going to ask you an additional question. Have you, per your point that you just made, has anyone here besides Mike had a dream that seemed so real to you? And if yes, are you willing to share how you reacted to it?
Stephen, I dreamt that my father died, and I went to speak to my rabbi because it was incredibly vivid. I've never had a dream like it, and I was very worried. I was very worried about my dad, but I never had a dream like it. I can't explain it. It was absolutely. When I woke up, I thought I had lived it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I once had a dream that I had like a days left too low, and I was in a bed with my family around me, and it was just very, very real. And the thought processes that went through my head, I remember, in fine detail, and yeah, I mean.
Okay.
Do you want to know more?
No, I just want to know to the extent that it impacted you or may have affected you.
Thoughts about literally being through that experience.
Yeah.
And I realized, that all the silly things in life, and my life was short, and family and love, but it was very, very.
It was very real, and you.
And curious about it, and I've always felt the impact very strongly, consistently, since.
Interesting. Okay. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
It was the night of August 30th, 31st, 97. I was fast asleep, had a very strange dream, and I remember running into my parents' room and saying to them, something strange has happened. There's a princess somewhere that's died.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I woke up the following morning and
That's
what happened.
I don't know if everybody on Zoom heard that, but just for the benefit of all those of you online, Mike had a dream. What was the date? August?
August. It was the night 30th, 31st of August.
31st of August, 1990. What was it?
97.
97, right. He had a dream that a princess died, came and repeated it over the next morning. And well, we all know what happened. Go ahead.
It's slightly more than a dream. It's just a little bit longer. I hope you can bear with me. I was driving the cab. I picked up a black girl of about 24, very, it was many years ago when the long coats were in fashion and the high boots. the D'Artagnan boots. She held me in Albany Street, which is one of the very few straight roads that run for about a mile from one end to the other. In London, there's not many straight roads. I picked her up at the northern end, spoke to her, and she sort of cut me short. Anyway, she asked me to go to Peter Robinson's, which in those days was at Oxford Circus.
Okay.
When I got to the one-way system at the bottom of Albany Street, I then said to her, "You want Peter Robinson's in Oxford Circus, not Sloane Street?" No reply. I looked round and there's nobody in the cab.
Right.
It was in the days when we had a black
Oh, yeah.
darkened rear window and just a small rear view mirror. That it was in January. It was one of those days when the rear window
It's all fogged up.
anyway. I turned the mirror down. I drove back to where I picked her up and then back again. Halfway along there's a police station. I reported it. The police sergeant made a note. He said, "All right, son, don't worry about
He
it."
didn't breathalyze you.
Yeah, but took the mickey out of
So
me
what,
that evening.
I'm going to come back if I may, sorry to interrupt you, because that will go square into a different topic that we have in 2 weeks' time, all about superstition. No, more so than dreams. There's about superstition and those sort of things, although could it be somebody who dodged the fair? No, I realize that. That's the point about whether or not we pay attention to these things, what happened, what didn't happen, etc. Just if I might share personally, per your point, I have actually never said this out loud before, although I may have shared this once with Khani. I'm not even sure I did, but I still have the vivid image that I woke up with. I have no recollection of the dream, but I remember having the image that I woke up with of my father with his usual gray hat, just lying there. Suit, tie, hat, just lying there. That was sometime January time, and June that year he was diagnosed, etc., etc., etc. So I always remain a little bit haunted by that. Thank God, I know. Yes, and meant for many more years. So here's the thing. The bottom line is this, and what we can take away from everything you've all shared is that we have complex relationships with dreams. Many people have dreams that might in fact seem very real. Some might have in fact taken action based on the dream. And at the same time, we tend to operate on the notion that for the most part, dreams are our imagination running wild. We generally and typically assume that by and large, dreams are meaningless. And most people will effectively do nothing. Most people will in fact consider them, if you will, to be a little bit nonsense. Hence the very term dream, right? When you tell somebody, "Ach, you're dreaming," or in Hebrew they say bachalomot, or in Yiddish they say chaloimus. In other words, it's all airy-fairy sort of stuff. It describes something unrealistic. We use the term dream to describe something that isn't necessarily real, because by and large, we assume dreams not to be real. So the general point for conversation here is, are all dreams, or let me rephrase that, are dreams all nonsense? Are they real? Are perhaps some real and some nonsense? And if so, how do we discern? How do we know what is real, what is nonsense, etc., etc.? Also, more precisely, what about nightmares? People do have nightmares. Are they real? Is there any way to stop nightmares, or do we just accept them as part of my imagination, again, running wild? Well, let's, in the first instance, look at the most basic place, which is the very Torah itself. We look in the book of Bereshit, we look in the book of Genesis, and we find any number of stories that are told by the Torah itself about dreams. The Torah, for example, tells us about Avimelech. When Abraham and Sarah are together, and at one point, Abraham comes to the place and he says, "This is my sister." He didn't want to say it's my wife because he was fearful that they would then kill him to take her, etc. He said, "It's my sister." At some point, Avimelech, the king, the Philistine king, did take her, but then God appeared to Avimelech in a dream and said, "Don't you dare lay a finger on her," etc., etc. And he came back the next day to Abraham with all kinds of complaints. "Why didn't you say so? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know she was a married woman. I could have done something, and it would have been your fault, not mine, because you said it was your sister." So God appeared to him in a dream. God had a communication with him in a dream. There's a similar story told about Laban. Love him. Our forefather Jacob spent many years there. He goes on the run. We read about that next week's Torah portion. He stays by him for many years. And eventually, when Jacob is getting ready to leave with his family, and Laban is upset and he goes in pursuit, at nighttime, he has a dream. And in his dream, God tells him, don't you dare harm him. Leave him be. And the next day when he meets up with Jacob, he recounts the dream and he says, God appeared to me and I know that I have to leave you alone, etc. One of the famous dreams that we all know about, of course, is Jacob's ladder. In the very dream, the Torah says he went to sleep at a certain spot when he was on the run before he came to Laban. And he has a dream where there's a ladder and there are angels coming up and down the ladder. And when he awoke, he realized this indeed must be a very holy place. He attributed reality to the dream. And then, of course, we all know Andrew Lloyd Webber, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. We have over there the famous butler and the famous baker and their dreams and Joseph's interpretation of those dreams and how ultimately they come to fruition. Perhaps above all the other dreams, the most famous one is that of Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh, again, in the book of Bereshit, has a very detailed dream where he sees 7 skinny cows eating 7 fat cows, as the Torah describes it. And then thereafter, he has a repeat dream where he sees 7 thin ears of corn eating 7 fat ears of corn. And he seeks out a number of people to interpret the dream. And the Torah again says that for all the interpretations, he rejected them. None of them made sense to him. That's when the butler recalled Joseph and said, I had this guy who interpreted my dream, and they bring him out, and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams as the 7 good years, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, and the fact that the 7 years of famine will be so severe, hence the skinny cows eating the fat cows, that you will not even realize about the 7 lean years that you had beforehand, because they'll be completely wiped out. The fact that you had the dream twice, he said, is to demonstrate that this is going to happen pretty immediately. And that resonated with Pharaoh. And therefore, and he made him viceroy, etc., etc. But as we know, those dreams very much came to fruition. But note in the first instance how Pharaoh actually summoned many, none who could interpret satisfactorily. Only Joseph was able to do so. 7 good years, 7 bad years, and so on and so forth. So what that demonstrates to us is that the idea of a lack of meaningful interpretation highlights that whilst dreams may in fact have meaning, we may not know or never necessarily know their meaning. And whatever interpretation we give as meaning to the dream might well be purely subjective interpretation. And another example in the Torah of another famous dream were Joseph's own dreams. So what happens? Joseph has a dream where he wakes up. That's what made the brothers go all irritated with him, and that's what made them sell him. He has a dream where he says the sun and the moon and the stars are all actually bowing down to him, which all the brothers and his father included took to mean that his father and his mother and his 11 siblings are all going to end up bowing down to him at some point or another. Now, that is the reality of what happened when he became viceroy in Egypt, but for one problem. Because the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars. The sun would be his dad, or the moon would be his mom, or vice versa, whatever it is. The problem is he didn't have a mom. His mother died long before when they left Laban. She died in childbirth on the way to the land of Canaan at that time. And in fact, that's what his father did right away to calm the upset of the brothers. He right away said, look, it's nonsense. He had this dream, sun, moon, and stars, etc. Because they said, what, you think we're going to end up becoming subjects of yours? We're going to bow before you? And he calms them down saying, look, obviously the dream is nonsense because the sun and moon are supposed to represent his parents. He no longer has both parents. The Talmud actually deduces from Joseph's dream about the idea of the sun and the moon and the parents, in other words, and the 12 and the 11 siblings, quote, just as there is no wheat without chaff, so too there is no dream without nonsense. In other words, they use the analogy to demonstrate, to emphasize the definitive fact that dreams are nonsense. But note the choice language. Just as no wheat without chaff, so too no dream without some nonsense. In other words, by definition, the emphasis is some nonsense. Dreams can be proven to be real, but maybe one part of it isn't. And that's what happened with Joseph. Some part of the dream could be nonsense. Other parts of the dream can be real. So that's what we have from the Chumash, from the Torah, and all of it in the whole, just in the book of Bereshit alone. The conclusion is this. From the Torah, it seems that dreams are meaningful, clearly so. But number one, it's hard to know which are real, which are not. It's certainly hard to interpret. And finally, there are clearly some nonsensical elements in the dream, as we saw with Joseph. But again, it's hard to know which are the nonsensical parts and which are not. So that's the Chumash, that's the Torah, and what we can deduce from it. Now let's consider what the Talmud says about dreams. The Talmud says very categorically, a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. It's not intended as definitive true-false ratio. The prophecy is always true, and dreams are only true 1/60th of the time. But the point is this, that whilst prophecy itself is true, because any prophet that we read about throughout all the scriptures, that's God speaking to them, etc. And the proof is always in the pudding, because God will communicate to a prophet to say something, to share something to the Jewish people. And that's how you will ultimately determine. Because when the person comes forth and says, I have a message from God, and you see that comes to fruition, you'll know he's an authentic prophet. But obviously, if it doesn't come to fruition, he's just a false prophet. But the point is, generally speaking, just as God speaks to a prophet, and it is true, dreams fall far short of this. The Talmud says they're 1/60th prophecy. They're not prophecy. They are indirect. Their meaning is not clear, and they're not completely accurate. But the basic rule that we take from this Talmudic statement, 1/60th prophecy, means that nevertheless, dreams can, in fact, be serious business. There is some element of the dream that can, in fact, be very much prophetic. And then the Talmud goes on to enumerate all different types and examples of dreams. For example, it talks about the idea, if you dream about yourself climbing on a roof, it means you're going to ascend to greatness. If you dream about an elephant, it means that wondrous things will happen to you, because in Hebrew, the Hebrew for elephant is peel, and the Hebrew for wonder is pella, so on that basis, etc. If you dream about olives, the Talmud goes into detail about why that means you'll be given the gift of wisdom. I'm not going to go into all of it, but the Talmud goes through a lot of different examples of this. Then there's a further discussion of the Talmud I'm not going to get into now, but bottom line, the Talmud also talks about how you might choose when you wake up from your dream to interpret it. That can become your reality. If you choose to interpret it negatively, that can become negative. If you choose to interpret it positively, then obviously you can bring positivity upon yourself. But that already goes to a different conversation. What we do know is this. What is clear from the Talmud is that dreams can be real. What you dream can very much materialize. But it doesn't necessarily mean that somehow your destiny is enshrined within the actual dream. In other words, it could happen, but it doesn't mean that it will happen. It may be a foretelling. Your dream may well be a foretelling of events to come. And if it is negative, then that will engender some kind of concern. And you could even fast. And the discussion in Talmud and Halacha is that, in fact, if you have a really bad dream and you remember it, and on the basis of the fact that it could be a foretelling of something, God forbid, negative that's going to happen to you, then the response to that is to fast. You open up many a siddur, and you will find in the back there's something all about Tanat Chalam. There's a certain prayer that you say. It's all about fast. Why fasting? Well, for the same reason like when we fast on Yom Kippur. When we fast on Yom Kippur, it is a form of repentance. It is a form of teshuvah. What do we say when we open up the ark and we do the famous Unatana Tokev prayer? We say uteshuva, utefila, utzedakah, specifically through repentance and through prayer and through charity that we can avert all negative decree. When we talk about repentance, that refers actually to fasting. So part of the fasting is all about removing any negative decree. You have a bad dream, says the Talmud, actually thereafter brought in Jewish law, that could be a foretelling of, God forbid, negative things. And you have the ability to therefore avert that by waking up, by ensuring to fast. And imagine this, you're even allowed to fast on a Shabbos. Under no other circumstances can you fast on a Shabbos. When that dream is there, it could be, for argument's sake, as a divine favor. You're getting a heads up about something that could happen. Again, that in itself proves the truth of dreams. In fact, it's serious enough that you can fast in response to it if it's a bad dream, even on a Shabbos, something you would never ordinarily do. When the 9th of Av falls on Shabbat, such a serious day, you postpone the fast to a Sunday. The 17th, any other fast, if it falls, except for Yom Kippur, if it falls on a Shabbat, you postpone it to a Sunday. We don't fast on Shabbat, except for Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is a biblical fast and it is referred to as Shabbat Shabbaton, like the ultimate Shabbat. But if you have a bad dream, you are instructed that yes, if you had it on a Friday night, you wake up Shabbat morning, you should go ahead and fast. What that demonstrates and what that points to from the Talmud clearly is the seriousness of dreams. So per what we were discussing over here before, it begs the question, to what extent does one actually take dreams seriously, and how serious should you take the dreams? In light of everything we've just said until now, based on the stories of the Torah, you see dreams can be real. Based on the discussion in the Talmud, you see that at least some element of it can be prophetic. And it's serious enough to the point where if you wake up and you're concerned, you react to it. Conversely, if it's positive and good, you can react to that too. And now I'm going to give you the complete flip side. There was a Roman emperor who came to Rabbi Yehoshua and he said, "You Jews think you're so smart. What am I going to dream about tonight?" And he answered him, "You're going to see Persians capture you and enslave you and force you to herd pigs with your golden staff." He laughed, the emperor. And then he went seeking Rabbi Yehoshua the next day because he dreamt exactly that. How did the rabbi know? A Persian king, Shapur, asked the same. He came to the famous Talmudic scholar Shmuel, Samuel, and he said to him, "You Jews think you're so smart. What am I going to dream about tonight?" He said, "You will see the Romans take you captive and force you to grind date pits with a golden mill." And that night he had exactly that dream. How did Shmuel know? And the answer is plain and simple. Both rabbis literally manipulated their imagination. Nothing more than that. By saying this is what you will dream, they planted those thoughts in their heads, prompting them to think about it all the rest of the day and thus dream about it at night. I mean, it's interesting, right? Obviously, the Romans and the Persians were arch rivals. So making such a statement prompted the Roman king to be thinking all about the Persians are going to do this to me, and the Persian king thinking all about, oh, this is what they're going to do to me. And precisely because they spent all day thinking about it, that's why they dreamt about it. Thus says the Talmud, it's impossible to try and imagine an elephant going through the eye of a needle. But if you do think about it, and you try to think about it, then somehow you can end up dreaming about that at night. In other words, because the elephant through the eye of a needle is so obviously impossible, the Talmud says if you dream something that impossible, well, frankly, it's not prophecy, it's nonsense. It's not even 1/60th of prophecy. It has absolutely no meaning. It's just your mind wandering because for whatever the reason you walked around by day trying to think about it. So the practical takeaway from this is that if you dream something very strange, you need to ask yourself, did I think about that at all during my waking hours, even subtly? Which is what created me and resulted in me having to dream about it at night. If you dream about something so fantastical, like an elephant going through the eye of a needle, then it's just your mind's randomness. And that therefore suggests everything, the contrary of everything that we established until now. That ultimately, with the two rabbis and the kings, etc., what that demonstrates is that dreams are based on imagination. What you think about by day is what you will dream about by night, but it doesn't necessarily have meaning whatsoever. So now we have an outstanding question, obviously, because we've cited texts, we've demonstrated from Torah, we've demonstrated from the Talmud, etc., that dreams are real, at least, 1/60th of it, if whatever, and possibly even more. And then we cited texts that demonstrate clearly that it's all about the imagination and it can be entirely manipulated. So how do we reconcile this contradiction? And the answer lies in another fascinating example, true story quoted in the Talmud. There was a father who had passed away. He had one heir, a son, and he left his son money. But Nebuch, the poor son, he had no idea where that money was, searching high and low. And then he had a dream. And in the dream, his father told him exactly where it was, under it, and right near a tree, buried for safekeeping, etc., etc. Imagine how exciting. He can find the buried treasure. And guess what? He woke up the next morning, he went there to look, and indeed, there it was. The dream proved true. One downside to his dream. It came with a caveat. His father told him where the money was, but then also said to him, you need to know that it's sanctified money. You can't use it at leisure. In other words, it was the case in temple times, etc., that when you had certain money, if you, for example, dedicated it to tzedakah, then that's what has to be done with it. If you dedicated it for whatever certain tithing purposes, that's what had to be done with it. It's sanctified money. So now what does he do? And he went and he consulted the rabbis at the time, and they told him the content of your dream is absolutely irrelevant. You can use the money as you so wish. So you see the problem. On the one hand, the dream clearly seemed to be prophetic because he found the money. On the other hand, the rabbis dismissed it outright. And as a general principle, don't pay attention to the dream. You can use the money as you wish. It's not holy. It's not sanctified. Same father, same dream, but the message is, lucky you, but ignore the dream. How does that even make sense? And the answer to that story goes to the very core of how, in fact, we are supposed to respond to dreams. And it is this. The Talmud quotes another contradiction elsewhere in the Talmud. There is a verse where God says, I speak to prophets in a dream. Elsewhere in the scriptures, there is a verse that says, dreams speak falsely. And Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, comes along and tells us and explains some dreams come from angels and some dreams come from demons. And I'll explain what that means. Up above, first of all, there are many holy forces at work. There are also negative forces, negative energies that are at work as well. That's how it works in life. In order for good to exist, there has to also be evil. Otherwise, it would be no free choice. All kinds of balances have to be there so that I now get pulled in one direction or another direction, and I exercise my own thinking process and my own choices to be able to determine which way I'm going to actually go. It's kind of like love. In order for love to be meaningful, you have to choose to love. If you're programmed to love, it's meaningless. If you have a choice, yes to love, not to love, and you choose to love, that very choice is precisely that which makes love meaningful. In a similar vein, if I'm programmed to only ever do good, then what I'm doing is absolutely meaningless. But when I have the choice to do good, because I'm pulled in one direction, maybe do good, but I also have a conscience that might be pulling me in a different direction, or evil conscience, if you will, then now I have a choice to make, and when I choose good, that's what makes it meaningful. And that's exactly how it works up above. There are these different forces at play. God allows for both elements or entities to exist in order to engender free choice, and thus a world that enables a man to grow into a Moses can also, in theory, enable a man to make himself into a Hitler, chas v'shalom. Now, what happens when you go to sleep? when you go to sleep at night, there is a part of your soul that always remains in you, obviously, because you remain eminently alive, but you are in an unconscious state. You are in an unconscious state because part of your soul leaves and ascends heavenward whilst you sleep. That's exactly why first thing we say in the morning is Moda ani lefanecha. Thank you, God, shehachazarta bi nishmati, that you return my soul into me. And just a few passages later, as we begin the morning prayer service, you say, Alakai, my God, and neshama shenatata bi, the soul that you gave into me, that you've restored into me, it is pure, it is this, etc., etc., etc. First thing you do when you wake up after you say Moda ani, thanking God for returning your soul, is you wash your hands. What we call netilat yadayim, or in Yiddish, negelwasser. You wash your hands in the identical way as you do, not before you eat bread, but as you would do when you're leaving God forbid, when you're leaving a funeral. Why? Because when you are at a funeral, you are exposed, if you will, to the spiritual contamination of the deceased. And that by definition is a spiritual concept because there's now a vacuum. There was a soul in the body, that it made the body holy. And when the soul leaves the body, it creates a certain spiritual vacuum. And in the face of that spiritual vacuum, there's a certain, what we would call ritual impurity that is there. And when you're under the same roof, some of that can cleave to you. And therefore you wash your hands to remove that impurity. That's the same reality when you wake up in the morning. You have to wash your hands because, again, part of your soul left you. So there's an element of ritual impurity that cleaves to you overnight while you sleep. And in the morning, first thing, you wash your hands like that in the very same way. But the point is this, the soul has left you. Part of your soul leaves you at night. Where does that soul go? Heavenward? Absolutely so. But where? Kabbalah says it all depends on how you treated, nurtured, and developed that soul throughout the course of the day. If you spent your day as a good person, I don't know, doing mitzvot, learning Torah, demonstrating kindness, maybe some prayer, etc., then your soul will elevate to a higher location in heaven. And you will draw vitality from there. And in that higher location in heaven, that's where angels roam. And the soul, therefore, for however brief a time, is interacting with those souls. And as Kabbalah explains, the soul can then also receive information from those souls, learn things from those souls. The angels can impart stuff to the soul, etc., etc. Case in point, Maimonides actually says in his Guide for the Perplexed, all that a person thinks about intensely during the day appears to him or her in a dream, and sometimes the solution to that which they cannot resolve when awake becomes clear to them in a dream. In other words, you might be walking around, spending ample time during the course of a day, thinking about a very difficult Talmudic question, and you're really, really agonizing over it. You go to sleep thinking about it, and you will sometimes wake up with the answer. This is the meaning of 1/60th of prophecy. It's not literal prophecy. It's not God speaking directly to you. Only lofty people were worthy of that sort of experience. But the angels can genuinely impart information to you, which you are dreaming about. And that's what you remember when you wake up in the morning. To the flip side, demons. Demons does not mean that somehow your soul is going to some scary place and you're mingling over there with demons. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that your soul is being exposed to negative forces that torment. The diametric opposite, in other words, of the angelic image and angelic dreams. No. If you're worthy based on daytime conduct, then you can soar high and you can experience real dreams. If not, then you don't. And you may not dream, or you may not remember any dreams at all. In other words, when we use the term demons, demons are explained to mean more psychological. You know, when you talk about, oh, the demon inside of me, or I'm grappling with my own demons, etc. It's not outside forces suddenly with pitchforks or whatever it is trying to grab hold of you. It's a negative energy that can overwhelm a person, that haunt a person. No, it's not any of that. Dreams can emanate just from, it doesn't go upstairs to the angels. It's just coming from a lower level, a much lower level, because you weren't necessarily a good person throughout the day. You were not nice to somebody, or you didn't do what you should have done, etc. Okay, so when your soul goes upstairs, you don't necessarily get the reward of your soul going to the higher place. It remains somewhere a little bit lower down. So if you're going to have dreams, dreams that emanate from that sort of experience are essentially nonsensical, meaningless. That dream is just a manipulation as a result of your overall experience throughout the course of the day. If you remember the dream, okay, you remember the dream, but you remember the dream purely on account of the fact that, again, like the Persian king or whatever, because somebody made you think about it all day. So that now helps us reconcile the apparent contradiction. Yes, some of the Talmud says it could be a mini prophecy. Another part of the Talmud says it could be all nonsense. Well, that very much depends on you. Depending on how you conduct yourself throughout the course of the day, if you're a mensch throughout the day, then there's every likelihood your soul will go up above to that higher source, mingling with angels at night. And when you wake in the morning and you remember that dream quite vividly, then there's a good chance that there's some truth to that dream with those angels having imparted that information to you. On the other hand, if that isn't the case necessarily, well, then your soul didn't go as high, and therefore what you're dreaming is essentially nonsense. Here's the only problem that remains outstanding from all of this. I've now demonstrated to you how we can reconcile the contradiction. But we've done that all academically. It doesn't help me. I'm a good boy today. I'm going to have a dream tonight. Do I know for sure that it's going to necessarily be prophecy? Maybe it's still nonsense. How do I know? Therein lies the question. Academically, you can reconcile by explaining this is why the Talmud says prophecy, angelic dreams. This is why it could be nonsense, non-angelic dreams. But on a practical level, how do I know? I don't know if I was really as good as I should have been. I don't know if I bypassed an opportunity. I don't know, even if I was, whether my soul tonight is, or last night was together with angels or whatever else. Should I therefore take my dreams seriously? So we've solved the problem with the Torah, the Talmud, etc., but I'm left needing to know what part still remains 1/60th prophecy. What part is nonsense? What should I pay attention to? So for this, finally, we're going to have to break it down into two types of dreams. There's one type, which is not a call to action. It's just a dream of facts. A dream may be a foretelling, a dream of a loved one. Whether it comes from a real source or not, angels or lower, I don't know. But either way, the dream itself doesn't cause in any way whatsoever any harm because it wasn't an instruction. You can choose to see it as meaningful. You can choose to embrace it as heartwarming if you so wish, or you can still, if you want to, ignore it as a figment of your imagination. But on an emotional level, the question still interests us. Is there any way to know whether or not the dream was meaningful? And then there are the other dreams that might have not just a dream, but an actual practical relevance. In other words, if it's a positive dream and it shows me a treasure map and where to find the missing inheritance, I could choose to follow it or I can choose to ignore it. No harm, no foul. But then there's a statement with practical halachic relevance. It's sanctified money. You can't use it. Now I need to clarify how to treat that money. Do I have to respond to that? Or by the same token, when there's a negative dream that's scaring me, God forbid, about my future, should I take that seriously and fast to avert a decree? Or is it just a meaningless nightmare? So again, the two types of dreams. The type of dream like he had, just simply about the fact that there's money somewhere, pay attention to it, don't pay attention to it. The other kind of dream that is telling you something is going to have some practical relevance to your life, this dream is holy money, that's already something altogether different. Dreams remain always in doubt. I had a dream that there is money somewhere. I could choose to go get it or I could ignore it. And if I go get it, hey, guess what? Yay, lucky me. The doubt remained. I just chose to act on the dream on the assumption that maybe it's real. Maybe it's being imparted by angels. And maybe my soul was there, so I might as well go check and see if the money is there. Maybe that is indeed my 1/60th of prophecy. The choice was mine. I acted on the doubt, which could have been ignored, but it materialized. Lucky me. That's what happened to that man. But when the dream comes along and gives me a categorical instruction about how to treat the money, again, the doubt is still there. And frankly, when in doubt, leave it out. Just like I don't have to pay heed to the doubt about whether or not the money is really hidden somewhere under the tree or whatever, I just choose to. I don't have to pay heed to the reference to it being sanctified money. For it to be deemed actually sanctified, I would need proof that it's sacred money, and a dream is not proof. On the other hand, when the dream is distressing, that seems to portend a negative future occurrence, since, again, there's a doubt, there is a chance, even a small chance, that that dream might be valid, then it makes sense, however much the doubt, caution is advising me, go ahead and fast if I'm worried about it. Yes, even on Shabbos. So there you have it. If it's a dream that is just giving you some general information, it might be angelic, it might be prophecy, whatever small amount of it, whatever, and go ahead and act on it if you so choose. But if it's giving you a categorical instruction, again, you can choose to act on it, but you don't have to, because all of it is just a doubt from start to finish. You don't know what part is real, what part isn't. And therefore the instruction, well, you don't have to follow instructions on the basis of a doubt. But to the flip side, if it's, God forbid, a negative dream, again, it's a doubt. You have a choice. Do you want to act on it? Do you want to fast? Because this could, in fact, be some information that was imparted by the angels when your soul was up there, and that therefore you should pay heed, just to hedge your bets, if you will, and make sure that you can avert the decree. And then there's a final point to consider in all of this. And there was a great mystic, a great scholar, and a Hasidic master called Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Actually, before that, there were these two Talmudic experts sitting and studying every single day, and they were very thoroughly entrenched in their studies, etc. And one day they had a conversation. Do they play tennis in heaven or not? And the first guy insisted, judging on everything that we've learned, yeah, they probably play tennis in heaven. The other one said, no, it's nonsense. They don't play tennis in heaven. They made a deal. Whoever passes first will come back to the other one in a dream and tell them whether they do or not, and who was right and who was wrong, etc. And Moshe passed away first, and not 1 week later, he comes to Zalman in a dream, and he says, Zalman, you remember me? He says, oh, Moshe, wow, God, great to see you. He says, do you remember the deal that we had? He goes, yeah. He goes, so tell me, no? He says, I've got good news, and I've got bad news. The good news is you were right. They do, in fact, play tennis in heaven. He says, I knew it. It was obvious. And tell me, well, what's the bad news? He goes, you're playing center court next Friday. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi says very categorically, one should not be worried about dreams altogether. All reference that is brought from the Chumash and the stories and from the Talmud, etc., all the reference to specific concern about dreams is only applicable, he says, exclusively to those who are particularly spiritually sensitive or of a particularly special spiritual stature, whose minds are wholly focused always and exclusively on holy matters, not on mundane matters. It then remains possible, he says, that there can in fact be a divine communication to them via a dream. So he's negating the idea of possible, not possible, souls, whatever, going higher, lower. If you are of that spiritual caliber, you're somebody who's truly holy, and you have experiences of all kinds, spiritual experiences of all kinds, then you are somebody that should take into account a dream that you have, because owing to your unique stature, that could in fact be a divine communication to you via the dream. Even then, you don't have to be governed by the dream. You cannot ignore the fact that a dream may still not be real. And even if it is real, it will always contain elements of nonsensical aspects, and that therefore you won't know necessarily what to pay attention to, what not. But then he carries on, and I'll quote, those whose minds tend to wander need not read anything into them whatsoever. The source of the dream is most likely because of wherever the mind may have wandered during the course of the day. I remember, I dare tell you this, only a few weeks ago, and I can relate to this, that parts of my dream, there were so many convoluted parts that all came together. Um, I had, I don't know if it was because of experiences that I had during the course of the week, etc. But they all connected to different conversations, different WhatsApp exchanges, and what was the dream? The dream was that my son, my oldest son, Mati's father-in-law, was at my gym with my trainer, and I was told that he replaced me. And the next thing I know, I remember this, we were actually at a fish market, me, my trainer, and now my son's mother-in-law, and my trainer, not Jewish, is insisting that she should buy the fish for Shabbos. And I mean, yes, I reflected on this afterwards. It was really weird and bizarre. I tend to remember sometimes my dreams. I do know that I had a WhatsApp exchange with my son's in-laws. We're on a wider WhatsApp group together. I also saw my trainer earlier that day. As it so happens, he asked me to try on my yarmulke just for kicks. I can't account for the fish market part. But that, nevertheless, is what happened. Daytime experiences fed into a nonsensical dream at night. And then Rabbi Shneur Zalman continues. Even for the person of lesser spiritual stature, for whom we say dreams are attributed to mind wandering, even for such a person, there still remains a chance that the dream does come from that source of angels above. And we cannot completely discount that possibility, even for that sort of person, that the dream does in fact have some truth to it. And then he says, hence we have the stories in the Torah and the Talmud of ordinary and completely non-inspirational individuals having valid dreams. But, and here's the kicker, for such a person, the balance of probabilities simply cannot justify severe disruptive steps such as fasting. In other words, unless you are an individual of unique spiritual caliber, if you have a bad dream, he says very categorically, you do not need to fast. And let's be honest, today in our world, I mean, you want to talk about mind-wandering conditions? It becomes amplified beyond all proportion between adverts and televisions and mobile phones and social media, etc. There's so much bombardment to which the brain is exposed, so much stimuli. It's a different world than yesteryear. So the bottom line is this, as far as he is concerned. If you are a person of unique spiritual stature and you indeed have a negative dream, you need to pay attention to it, because that's God giving you a heads up. If you are as ordinary as I am, then to all intent and purposes, your dream is just as a result of all the stimuli you were exposed to over the course of the day. Even so, it's perfectly possible that you're still having a dream because of the angels and your soul is up there and some information was communicated to you. So it's okay to pay heed to it if you so want to. If it's negative, on the other hand, you don't have to pay heed to it to that sort of extent. Again, it doesn't justify severe disruptive steps such as fasting, which is why he rules halachically that it would be wrong to fast and certainly not on a Shabbat. You don't need to. And yet, finally, still, after all said and done, we don't like to take chances. We have an established possibility of dreams being real. We want to hedge our bets. And that's why you will find, quite amazingly, in every single machzor in the world, on the festivals, when the Kohanim go up to do the duchening, there is this special prayer, and it's customary to recite this special prayer. Not during when the Kohanim are saying the actual words, because you're supposed to hear the words, they're blessing you, but that's exactly, in case you ever wonder why, but they do the singing bits. Well, in this shul, they do maybe just a quick singing bit before the final word, before Amen. In many shuls, they sing before every single word, so that you have an opportunity to say that necessary prayer. A small little snippet of what that prayer says. I am yours, referring to God. My dreams are yours. I have dreamed. I don't know what it is. And we go on asking, whether I dreamt about myself or I dreamt about other people or other people dreamt about me, they should always be turned for the good. If they are good, strengthen them. If they require healing, bring about the healing, etc., etc. And then finally we say, just as you turn the curses of the wicked Bilam to blessings, so you should turn all my dreams for the good. It's interesting that that Bilam, the sorcerer of Mesopotamia, was chosen as the reference. He was a prophet, albeit he always drew his prophecy, God allowed for it, from the demonic forces, if you will, from the negative forces. Hence my dream. Is it prophecy from the angels or the negative, nonsensical sources, whatever? So I want to make sure to hedge my bets. The prayer is very real. By the way, just why specifically at that time? Why only when the Kohanim are going up to do the duchening? So the Zohar, the primary source of all Kabbalah, actually says when the Kohanim are up there doing the blessing, it is a uniquely auspicious moment in the world, a time when divine compassion is experienced throughout the world. So what that demonstrates ever so forcefully, again, is it reflects the possibility that it is not something that we should discount if we don't want to. It can't hurt. The dream might have some very real substance to it, and we should pay attention to it. The bottom line, therefore, and with this I conclude, is this. When you have a dream, number one, ask yourself, am I a serious person with daytime thoughts under my control? Number two, have I engaged in spiritual matters today? I did prayer, extra mitzvot, perhaps it's something special, etc. If the answer to that is yes, take the dream seriously. Positive visions, interaction with loved ones, view them as meaningful. Go in search of the inheritance money. Even so, it's not enough certainty to take necessary action or alter legal decisions, etc. You can't rule that the money is sacred. And if the answer is no, then treat the dream with a great degree of skepticism. If it makes you feel good, by all means, don't dismiss it. After all, again, there's every chance still that it's coming from a semi-prophetic place. But you need not accord them sufficient weight and certainly not need to take action upon them. Thus, even if it's a bad dream, you need not fast. But again, on the basis of lingering doubt, that prayer that we say however many times in the course of the year, that's why we do it. So if we're going to talk about shaping the content of our dreams, if somebody is bothered by dreams, if somebody finds themselves upset by dreams, you can actually shape the content of your dream. Number one, by generally throughout the course of the day, taking better control of your thinking process. Throughout the course of the day, don't be a negative person. Try to exercise your ability to focus on the positive and on productive matters. Number two, it is up to you to up your own spiritual game in any which way you feel you can. It could be prayer, it could be doing extra mitzvot, Shabbat candles, tefillin, whatever it is. Number three, this is an interesting and a very important one. The Lubavitcher Rebbe instructed a number of people who commented about that were having constant nightmares. Make sure the mezuzah on your bedroom is a kosher one. That's highly important. Halacha is not superstition. Halacha doesn't even discuss mystical ideas. Halacha gives you cold facts. And quite unusually, halacha, when discussing all the various aspects and laws of mezuzah, says that a person should be extra careful to ensure that the mezuzah is 100% kosher because it affects much of what goes on in their personal material lives, health-wise, dream-wise, and every which other way besides. Which is why, even if you put them up and you leave them there, you should take them at least once every other year or once every 2-3 years to certainly have them checked. It's very, very important. It impacts dimensions of your physical and material well-being. Number four, it's in every sitter as well. Say the Shema before you go to sleep. There is a whole little prayer in every single sitter, asking, with the blessing, a special blessing, asking for a peaceful sleep, asking to wake up healthy in the morning, asking that your soul be looked after during your sleep. Very worthwhile doing. In other words, how we dream can very much depend on us. We can shape our dreams by elevating our own stature. We can avoid bad dreams through the aforementioned methods. We can avert negative events portended by bad dreams, even if coming from a holy source through prayer and so on and so forth. Dream less, do more, because ultimately our actions shape our dreams. I'll end on that just to tell you that next week our topic is stars and signs, horoscopes and astrology, free choice, or is our fate determined from above? Right. We can